help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And right now, you can do just that by being part of the largest spring 40 Days for Life campaign ever, 604 cities. So what that means is the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade on June 24th. Great day for our country. Then, to my surprise, because we lost so many cities for the best reason, which is their abortion facility closed post-Roe, I thought we would go down in the U.S. especially, but we didn't. So last fall, we had the largest fall 40 Days for Life campaign ever. That is now continued into the Lent. We'll have the largest spring 40 Days for Life campaign ever. We're just a weekend, if you're listening to this podcast right when it comes out on February the 28th. So go to 40daysforlife.com and find your location. We have some pharmacies involved, CVS and Walgreens and Rite Aid. We got some of those locations, and of course, covering the hundreds of abortion facilities that are still operating around America today. So that is the call to action. Go to 40daysforlife.com. And if you haven't already, for those of you who are audio listeners to the podcast, we did add a video feature, and the podcast downloads and views are way up, audio and video. So we really have increased our footprint. We hope and pray that's a good thing, that more people are listening to the podcast. Today, we are going to talk about the Satanic Temple getting into the abortion industry. So that is the topic for today. Slow down, Walgreens and CVS, with your fluffy abortion pills. The Satanic Temple is here to take it up to a whole new level. So we will cover the serious part of that, the non-surprising part of that, and the surprising part of that on today's podcast. If you've seen this in the news, the Satanists are getting a lot of attention. Typically, the devil doesn't want, but suppose he cannot help himself this Lent. So joining me on this Satanic Temple podcast, somebody who renounces Satan and all his evil works, is Mr. Steve Carlin, who joins us from Madison, Wisconsin. Steve, the first week of Lent is over. How you doing?
We've made it. Yeah, we're 1 week in. It's all looking good. And I'm doing a lot better than I think Walgreens and CVS are. You know, it doesn't seem to be the best product placement when you're announcing the rollout of a product that is also being sold by an organization that favors infanticide of children who have been born, and then another organization that is literally the Satanic Temple. I don't think that's good business.
Yeah, and Snicker bars are on sale this week, you know.
Yeah.
I think that Walgreens and CVS, the executives need to observe Lent. I think Lent would do them a lot of good. I'm not sure that that's happening, but we continue to pray for them, and we continue to go out and offer alternatives at those locations where those dangerous drugs are being dispensed as we speak. Go back and listen to that podcast, by the way. We did that a couple of weeks ago where we broke down the whole pharmacy doing abortions thing. So Lent, as we covered last week on the podcast, a great time for prayer and fasting and giving alms and spiritual reading and silence. It's a great reset. So be sure you go back and listen to the podcast from last week where we discussed Ash Wednesday. Also, thank you, Town Hall, for publishing my op-ed on Ash Wednesday. Because Steve, as you know, and we've mentioned before, for some reason, Catholic churches and other denominations that now observe Ash Wednesday, which is growing. Someone is making Ash Wednesday great again. It's more popular than ever. And so I wrote an op-ed on that because we're just completely consumed with self and affirmation. That's all we long for in our identity, and forcing our identity on others, whether that identity is true or not. And yet Ash Wednesday is more popular than ever. It's very encouraging.
It definitely is. It's such a reminder to our culture, especially, I think, Sean, at this time. We see some of the stuff that's going on in medicine, and the whole, I don't want to get into the COVID vaccine discussion again. It's been covered so many times.
Why not, Steve? Let's spend 9 hours talking about the COVID vaccine. Let's go. We'll start now.
But you see some of the rhetoric around it. They've said things like, we're going to create vaccines that will abolish illness entirely. And there's this effort to make people immortal and all of these sorts of things, as though, longer time on this earth doing the same stuff that we already do is what will finally satisfy the deepest longings of the human heart. And I think Ash Wednesday is that reminder that however good our technology gets and however good we get at distracting ourselves from the inevitable, we are meant for something beyond the dust that we come from and the dust that we shall return to.
I did not get the COVID vaccine. You brought this up, but I have noticed that is a good example. The COVID vaccine issue has gotten worse over time, in that the conspiracy theorists' stock continues to go up. And so there were a lot of reasons, valid reasons, to get the vaccine, a lot of good reasons not to get the vaccine. And now we have all this information about the vaccine and the mandates and the mask. And anyways, the only thing I will say, I read a great article by a medical doctor and a PhD, he's a researcher. And basically, it was in Newsweek, actually. And he said, I was wrong. Like, why can't medicine just admit they were wrong? They were reactionary. We didn't need to do the lockdowns. We didn't need to do, people can disagree with that. And some, I'm sure, do. But why can't a certain segment of medicine say, we shouldn't have told people they can't go to work or they're going to get sick and die. So anyways, I'm glad that COVID is behind us. I say that because I obviously consider COVID behind us. I know people are still getting COVID. COVID is still out there. I just had a relative get COVID, but I don't mean the actual virus. I mean the COVID part of COVID that makes our stomach upset. So we moved on from that. And with that, I was thinking about, I'm glad you brought up the vaccines, actually, Steve. This is a non-controversial podcast, as you know, as we're talking about the Satanic Temple and the COVID vaccine now. But I was thinking about COVID earlier today because I was going over our numbers. And if you remember, Steve, 2020, during COVID, our volunteer participation skyrocketed.
There's nothing else to do.
There was nothing else to do. You can go outside and pray in front of Planned Parenthood. You'll be healthy as all get out. And so our participation went up. That continued in 2021. And then 2022, the persecution increased. We had the DOJ, the FBI, the overturning of Roe, people saying they're going to go to Kavanaugh's house and murder him, all this craziness. And the participation continued to grow. And there is this theme, it's very Lenten, which is the more we're persecuted, the more trial and tribulation, the more we're forced to rely on Christ and grow in our faith and put our head down and go out. And the culture war is on fire, basically, with just insanity. There's so many people that have a voice that are completely unreasonable. And yet the pro-life movement is thriving. And what we believe one of the most difficult things to do in the pro-life movement, which is to go out in front of your abortion facility in the snow and in the rain, that's more popular than ever before, just like Ash Wednesday.
It is, because I think people are looking for hope these days. whether it be the COVID situation or the persecution or just sort of the malaise that I think our country finds itself in right now. I know, Sean, you were talking about you read
Walker
the
Piercy.
moviegoer. Yeah, the malaise.
Wow,
We have settled into a
malaise.
cultural level malaise.
Now
But
we
we're
gotta
looking
talk
for
about
hope.
Walker.
This podcast has it all.
This is out of control. If you haven't read The Moviegoer by Walker Piercy, great Lenten read. High school and up, Steve. 18 and up. High school and up.
Yeah, I don't think we'd say that for every Walker Percy book, but this one,
no,
I think high school
but
and
this
up.
one is okay. Yeah, high school and up. Anyways, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, just I think there's sort of a malaise or a despair that's settled in upon our culture these last few years. I don't think that's the least controversial thing we might say on this episode. And people are looking for hope. And where do you find that hope? You find it in God, you find it in Jesus Christ, and you find it in so many cases manifest out on the sidewalks in front of abortion facilities. You find it in the pro-life movement, where I say it all the time on that dark, it's just over 7 years ago now that we woke up on that dark, dreary, cold Saturday morning to find out the news that Justice Scalia had died. And who would have dared to have believed? You'd be called an idiot if you would have said, yeah, in a few years, a pro-life majority in the Supreme Court's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. It would sound insane. And here we are. Roe is gone. Lives are being saved. The momentum is building. And we're seeing miracles, literal miracles, out on these sidewalks day in and day out. We've been having, Sean, as you know, a hard time. You know, you've got your emails that you sent out every day during the course of the campaign. We've got magazine, we've got this podcast, and there are so many reports of good news coming in from the front lines of the battle spiritually to end abortion. We've got a hard time finding places to put them all.
Yes. And that's absolutely true. We're loaded up with good news. It's one of the reasons we have this podcast and we have Day 41 magazine. And it's not good news like, you know, everything is just perfect and we have rose-colored glasses on, which we're going to get into today. The Satanists are now doing abortions, so it's not rose-colored at all. But there's a lot of good news. I mean, there is a lot of good news, and that's why it's important to participate in 40 Days for Life and make it part of your Lenten journey. So, okay, let's get into these Satanists. First off, I have a little bit of a bone to pick in that. So in our books or the podcast or speeches, I've said in media interviews, I've said, Steve, I'm sure you've said, I know a lot of pro-life people have said, and not in a nutty way, but in a very accurate way, that abortion is evil. Abortion is satanic. It's the sacrifice of an innocent baby.
Oh, that's
Jesus
not,
Christ.
you're watching too much Fox News, Sean. That's not really, nobody in favor of abortion really likes Satan.
Yes, Fox News told me that abortion was satanic, and I just blindly received it. Now I regurgitate it in all of my talks. So we say these things. Abortion is satanic. Who in the world would ever fathom hurting a baby, much less killing a baby, much less creating a system where we can kill? Now the new number is 72 million in the world every year. It is unspeakable what we have to talk about, and what we have to talk about in our churches and at the vigils and in speeches and in books and in podcasts and in everything else. But we have to talk about it because they have no voice but ours. It is satanic. The devil loves abortion. And you're a nut and you're crazy and you're a religious zealot. Then the Satanists announced that they're doing abortions in New Mexico. And The Guardian, we'll get into that, and all these other ridiculous, stupid media outlets start talking about how sophisticated it is that the Satanists are now getting into the abortion industry. And you're sitting here going, what? I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, much less 30 or 40 years ago, the Satanists now joining in the abortion industry, and people are like, well, it's another respectable religion. You know, yeah, but we said the Satanists loved abortion. We were told we were lunatics. Now they love it so much they're doing it, and you're clapping.
The science has changed.
First, you brought up the COVID vaccine. Now you're bringing up all of the science. You're on you must have read an article today. Steve's on a COVID rant today, so which I'm very happy about. Okay, so hopefully, that's my little rant about that's just the world, right? If we say it, it's horrible and outrageous, and if they say it, it's reasonable and responsible. Satan does love abortion. This is evil. It is a spiritual battle. In this podcast, we're going to break down the two parts of this because there are two parts. I didn't think there were at first. I thought there was only this is evil. The devil is showing his true colors. Satan loves abortion. It makes perfect sense that Satan's followers do abortions. Totally perfect. I'm Catholic. We've had incidences where Satanists are going to communion and trying to steal the host for the Black Mass. Satanists exist. I've encountered them at the vigil. I've encountered them in Catholic churches. I understand the true evil nature and reality of it. That's why we've been yelled at for writing about it and saying it in talks all these years. However, there is another part to this, which is goofy, Steve, and we'll get to that also. And that is not typically how the devil works, and we'll cover that. But there's a certain goofiness that the devil usually doesn't mess around with. And one of the great lessons of the devil and goals is to convince the world that he doesn't exist. So I do think that the outwardness of this, which Planned Parenthood doesn't like, they're having to say they like it. I have never met an abortion supporter, Steve. Maybe you have because you're in Madison. I've never met an abortion supporter, an abortion worker, and certainly a woman who had an abortion, who wanted to be associated with Satanists in a public way.
Yeah, it's usually not good for the brand, huh? I don't even know how to add any analysis to that because it's so self-evident that the devil is not who you want as your spokesperson. But here we go. I mean, the background of this, Sean, of course, is that just this past month, Valentine's Day, we're talking 2 weeks ago here, the Satanic Temple opened up an abortion business to do literally ritualistic abortions. They call it the Satanic Temple abortion ritual. This stuff, again, if we would have said anything even 30% of the way to what is actually going on right now, we would have been laughed at. You know, we did the podcast last year, like, why do pagans sacrifice their children? And Sean, you'll remember, and some of the listeners will remember, the British journalist who wrote the hit piece on it is like, this sounds like some sort of QAnon conspiracy theory. Well, here we are. Pagans kill their kids. Satanists are killing their kids. There is a spiritual war here. We've been saying it for years. Everybody who's a person of faith has been saying it. And now it's right out there in the open. Literally, the Satanic Temple not just opening an abortion facility, but opening what they have named the Samuel Alito's mother abortion clinic. Samuel Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. That is the name. I think they need a few more words in there. It's pretty wordy as it is. It sounds like something you would read in like a comic strip or a satire or The Onion. I don't know.
It's goofy.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't dedicate it to some demon. There are a lot of demons with names. They didn't dedicate it to one of the 7 deadly sins. They didn't dedicate it to things that a truly religious thing would dedicate it to. They dedicated it to Samuel Alito's mom, like making fun of him on the playground because he wrote the opinion that overturned Dobbs. And that, I will tell you, Planned Parenthood doesn't like. If you want to be the Satanist, that's already bad enough. But the goofiness of it, Planned Parenthood typically doesn't get into. They're very corporate. They're very professional in most cases. Their current CEO isn't very competent. We've talked about that a lot. But overall, they don't get into this. Samuel Alito's mom, she's a woman. Usually don't really go into those areas. So it's goofy. It's a stupid name for an abortion facility. It makes me think, I'm not sure how serious they are about actually attracting a lot of women and doing a lot of abortions. Leroy Carhart would never name his abortion facility that. Planned Parenthood would never name an abortion facility that. So, it's one of those. I highly encourage people to go back to that podcast that Steve referenced on paganism and sacrifice, because we get into all the historical context of that. And to defend the media, since we've been ripping them, I did an interview with Fox News last year, Steve, and it was Lauren Green, and she had listened to that podcast and took a lot of notes and asked me about it because she thought it was fascinating in a good way, and she agreed with it. And she put that on the air. So, but she's a great reporter. But that's a very important podcast for now, because we used to be the only side talking about spiritual warfare. And we were mocked for it, and we didn't care because we knew it was true. And the actual nature of abortion is good versus evil. Our Lord came to save us through the womb. And now statistically, that's the most dangerous place in our world. And the other side laughs it off as if you're, getting a hangnail removed. But the devil doesn't laugh it off. He loves it. He loves it, and he thrives on it, and he wants more of it. And this is yet a classic example of that. So, Steve, the reason we're doing a whole dedicated podcast on this is because this, unfortunately, is not an isolated event. This has been a growing trend where every so often we see the Satanists just can't help themselves, and they jump out in front of something to do with abortion publicly.
Yeah, this really made headlines in a big way back in 2013. The Texas legislature was looking at a number of different bills that would restrict abortion back before there was the opportunity post-Roe to prohibit it. And you had the abortion supporters in the state capital of Texas in Austin. It looked pretty insurrection-y to me, Sean. They're taking over, they're screaming, they're making noise, and they're chanting, "Hail Satan." Was that goofy? Was it true? I'd venture a guess that it's probably somewhere in the middle. You invoke Satan, even if you're joking, guess what? You get Satan. You invoke the devil, you get the devil. And certainly, I think the presence of the demonic was evident in the Capitol during that legislative session as those bills were being deliberated.
I was there.
Yeah. So you can say firsthand, you witnessed it.
It was a little of both. Because some people you get actual real Satanist guy, it's kind of like pull your kids a little closer to you. And then you get goofball Hail Satan guy that just wants to make Christians mad or make fun of Christians or just say the word Satan, because he saw it in Rosemary's Baby. It's a little of both. But that's 2013.
Yeah. Well, this isn't even the first time we've seen the Satanic Temple taking action. Prior to Roe, Missouri had the longest mandatory waiting period. It's not uncommon for a state to have, say, a 24-hour waiting period so that the mom can think it over before she makes this decision because it's so irreversible. Missouri went and they put into effect a 3-day, a 72-hour waiting period. And it was a Satanic Temple that led the legal battle in that charge. So we saw that just a few years ago. We saw at a 40 Days for Life vigil in Bellingham, Washington, where Ramona Trevino just came back from speaking at that location. Sort of I don't even know how to describe it. A lot of opposition.
Have you been there? Have you been to Bellingham?
I have not been to Bellingham.
Okay, I went there in 2008. To the 40 Days for Life campaign way back in the day. I've been there since then, but that was my first trip. It's like a super cool town. It's beautiful north of Seattle in the mountains. And you drive in and you're like, this is gorgeous. And then you get in there and you're like, it's like a cool, grungy coffee, everybody smoking marijuana town.
These things usually don't end up well, and it certainly didn't end up well in Bellingham. They're doing great work there. They've done great work amidst persecution, but there was that video that came out of this unhinged woman who's...
Sorry.
What did you say?
Satan is the one true Lord. Satan, the dark Lord.
You have a sweet We'll pray for you.
Oh yeah, I didn't abort her. I kept her.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just out here praying and trying to support the community.
We don't need your prayers. You do, hon.
Have a good night.
Hail Satan!
Or like if she were like completely unhinged, like screaming and like maniacal, it's almost would be less disturbing than sort of the calm manner in which he said, "Hail Satan, the one true Lord, the dark Lord, hail Satan." It's beyond creepy, and I think that lady maybe bought it. I don't know if that was a joke.
No, she was a real Satanist. She was a real Satanist, and we sent an email out about that. But she wasn't kidding around. She wasn't like, "Hail Satan, man." I mean, she was actual hail Satan, and he is the dark Lord of the world, and you're mine, you know. So she was the real deal. And again, there is a huge part of that in the Satanic Temple doing abortions in New Mexico. What I'm saying is the goofy part is the public front that they're putting on with the name of the clinic and just the way they're going about it.
It's really wild because what if we heard every election season or every single time there is legislation to defund Planned Parenthood or every time there's some pro-life bill, Cecile Richards up to today, the revolving door of CEOs that they've had, they kind of like have the very stern look on their face and they look at the camera and they say, abortion is not a decision that any woman ever takes lightly. It is a serious consideration that is only made after deliberate and careful consultation with the woman's family, with the woman's doctor, with the woman's pastor, with the woman's God. They say all of this stuff, and then they're going to go ship you off to, Sam Alito's mom's satanic abortion clinic. It's at the very least, it's a messaging fail for them. I think a lot of people are going to see through it. So we've got that going for us. And it shows how unserious these abortion supporters are.
I'm wondering if it'll carry over into the 2024 elections. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the teacher union, the veterans, and the Satanists. I would like to welcome them all to my coffee and donuts this Saturday morning. It just doesn't, it's hard to make Satan outwardly mainstream. If you just leave people alone, they'll follow him. But if you bring him up, people think you're crazy if you're against him, and they think you're odd if you're for him. Anyways, that's why those movies, The Omen, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, that's why they're scary, or they kind of freak you out.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests. Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself. Now, if you've seen as many psychotics as I have, you'd realize that's the same thing as saying you're Napoleon Bonaparte. You asked me what I think is best for your daughter. 6 months under observation in the best hospital you can find.
You showed me Reagan's double. Same face, same voice, everything. And I'd know it wasn't Reagan. I'd know in my gut. I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
You don't watch those movies and are like, let's get the kids up. Let's make some popcorn and put the peanut M&Ms in there and watch Rosemary's Baby when they scream, hail Satan at the end. Because that's not really acceptable. Not because it's acceptable, but because people know what it is. They know who the devil is.
This is, I think, the first time I've seen where, like, we've had the movies about the devil before and the Rosemary's Baby and the Exorcist and all these different things. And it was just assumed the devil is the bad guy. And I don't know how exactly we've lost that, but now there seems to be this sort of ubiquitous, like, the devil is everywhere and it's cool to identify with the devil. We had that demonic presentation at the Grammys with Sam Smith and the I can't remember whether it was a man or a woman, and I don't think he or she even knew whether he or she was a man or a woman, but it seems like this is sort of the new trend. It's fashionable. We've seen advertisements for clothing that are dabbling satanic imagery. I don't know exactly what it is, other than it reminds me of the scene from the great cinematic masterpiece Ghostbusters 1, where they let the ghost containment unit opened up and the demons are all flooding into New York City. It feels like that's what we're living through right now.
Okay, that was genius analogy. Because everybody's laughing, Ghostbusters, and because that's how they're portraying it. But everybody in their home and everybody listening to this and everybody who sees the Guardian praising the Satanist, they're not thinking of Ghostbusters. The Guardian, and we'll get to that, and all the media want them to think of Ghostbusters. And I think, Steve, you would think of Ghostbusters no matter what the topic was. It could be
absolutely.
But what they think about is The Exorcist and The Omen and Rosemary's Baby and the whole Hail Satan thing. Of course, The Exorcist, we win, and we win big. We meaning the Christians. But, those, like, if you just call somebody up, you say, hey, you want to watch Ghostbusters? And they're like, oh, man. They'll start quoting it. And they'll start laughing at Bill Murray, who at one time I was next to in an airport, and I almost told him a line from Ghostbusters, but I didn't want to be that guy. But if you say, hey, I've had a long day at work. You want to come over and watch The Exorcist? They're like, I don't know, man. That's like a once in a decade, It's like, so it's totally different because of the weight. The Exorcist is the scariest movie in the history of film because it's real. And it was a phenomenon. I think it's like 9th all-time gross when they do the adjustment for inflation. I mean, it was a worldwide phenomenon. And it's one of the hardest movies to watch because it's real. And the devil is real and everybody knows it. But to take this subject and to use it as the Ghostbuster approach, this is what happens when you name your stupid abortion temple, Samuel Alito's mom's abortion clinic. And this is why I'm so sick of all this. They're out for women's rights. What woman have we ever worked with, Steve, who was going in for an abortion, who was hiding from her parents or her pastor or her abusive boyfriend, or she was forced to have an abortion, or she was broke, or she was on crack, whatever the scenario is, and we've encountered all of them. How many of them are going to walk into a place that's named, they don't even know or care who Samuel Alito is. Like, it's just a goofy thing. Planned Parenthood has spent billions of dollars over their existence branding Planned Parenthood, the most deceiving title of any entity, right? And unfortunately, they've done a brilliant job at branding that. You can go to Crossroads Abortion Facility or Women's Health Abortion Facility or Women's Care Abortion Facility. That's how real abortionists work. They don't say George W. Bush is a warmonger or reproductive rights clinic, and these goofy phrases. And that's why I don't think that part of it is good. I think it's good for us, but they're going partially with the Ghostbusters. And maybe this is the new tactic, and not the lady in Bellingham. She was Rosemary's Baby. She was The Exorcist. Hail Satan. He is our Lord. And they were just, out with it. But these other people, it's Ghostbusters. It's goofy, but the topic is not goofy.
This is where I think we really see the leadership void at Planned Parenthood. They've got the revolving door at CEO. They settled on Alexis McGill Johnson because she was a culture warrior. They had sort of the technocratic Leanna Wen, and she wasn't enough of a zealot, and now they've got Alexis McGill Johnson. And while she might not have gone out and said, yes, we're going to open up Planned Parenthood's, Amy Coney Barrett's mom abortion facility, they're not jumping on with it. They've lost control of the narrative. The sort of perception of Cecile Richards as the adult in the room is gone. They don't have anybody that has even a perception of authority to kind of help them get that toothpaste back in the tube, get that bus back in the garage. It is just crazy town, and you hear really silence from Planned Parenthood on that front.
Yes, and typically the adult in the room when it comes to the Satanists is Satan. And he lives in a world of half-truth and deception. He's reprehensible and he's attractive, and which Mel Gibson does a great job of in The Passion of the Christ, showing the devil. He's talked about that in interviews, like sort of this attractive, creepy, scary figure who you're interested in, but you don't want to be near. That's the adult in the room, and that's the part that I think is good for us, is the goofy part. And maybe that's probably part of the deception. People won't take it seriously unless you're already in the pro-life movement and you know that abortion is satanic and it is from the devil when they're quoting Ghostbusters or they're quoting The Exorcist. We know that from our side, so maybe it's part of the deception, but the media is partaking, and this is one of the issues. So part of the Satanic Temple, they don't, whether they literally believe in the devil or not, part of that is irrelevant. What is relevant, and I mentioned this earlier, so we're going to get to it. The Guardian. Okay, here's The Guardian. This is their quote. Satanists don't believe in Satan in a literal demonic sense, but rather as a symbol of rebellion and opposition to authoritarianism.
That sounds
good to know.
Very sophisticated.
Let's cancel the recording of this podcast. That is so nice. The Satanists don't believe in Satan. They're not using his name. Well, they are using his name. They don't actually believe in him.
It's not like there's an abortion ritual. Oh, wait, they also have that.
They're just rebels. They're like the Confederates during the Civil War. They just want to go do their own thing and cause a stir. It's absolutely absurd. So the Guardian's now speaking for the Satanists. This is definitely on the comical thing. So Satanist guy says, I'm a Satanist, hail Satan, and to hell with Christianity, and I want as many abortions as possible. And the little reporter from The Guardian is like, oh, you don't quite mean that. Like, what else does the guy have to say? He's like, I have the devil statue. I go to the Satanic Temple. I donate money to the Alito Mom Clinic. I'm a Satanist, and the little Guardian guy's like, oh, not literally, it's just like, what? So, that Steve, okay, let's flip it around, to be fair. Let's say some crazy pro-lifer says something. God hates women or something. And we're like, that person doesn't literally believe that God hates women. He stands on the sidewalk and screams it with the bullhorn and yells it to the women. And he told that to the NBC affiliate also, that God hates women. But we're speaking on his behalf. God doesn't really hate women. This guy doesn't really believe that. He just believes in, rebellion.
It's pretty wild, the contrast in coverage. You'll remember, what was it, a year or two ago, that The Guardian had the piece where they're describing the 40 Days for Life prayer warriors. It's like, well, they're just standing there. They're silently praying. But it's just weird. It's just creepy. We feel weirded out by seeing these people, as though England and the rest of the UK and the rest of the West wasn't built on a foundation of Christendom and belief in the Lord. But it's creepy. It's creepy. Just people standing there is creepy. Meanwhile, this is what they write in The Guardian about the Satanic Temple. Quote, the Satanic Temple will keep chipping away at the inroads the Christian right have made. This religion, one of the most curious churches in a country full of them, is in it for the long haul. End quote.
Don't you alpha and omega us. We're in it for the long haul too. Oh my word. This is just a great time to laugh at the media. The Satanic Temple will keep chipping away at the inroads the Christian right have made. What does that mean? Like in the history of salvation? Those inroads? Like Paul's conversion? Like those,
the incarnation,
the Annunciation, they're going to chip away at the angel Gabriel. I mean, what are they chipping away against? Is it like a political thing? Like the crazy Christian Supreme Court overturn Roe. Let your heart not be troubled. The Satanists are going to come in, and they're making inroads by opening up Samuel Alito's mom's abortion clinic.
I mean, they write that the presence of people peacefully and silently praying and offering abortion alternatives is, quote, creepy. And have you seen that like demon statue that they've got where it's like the animal head with the pentagram?
And
that's not creepy.
That is
though.
real. That's real, Steve. And that's why the guy at The Guardian is dead wrong. He's dead wrong. They don't literally worship Satan. Yes, they do. That's like telling, Christians, they don't literally think that Jesus rose from the dead. I mean, he's buried somewhere, probably in Syria. We don't know, but he died. He didn't rise from the dead. That's absurd. No, we actually believe he rose from the dead, and they believe in Satan and believe he's the prince of darkness, and we believe he's the prince of darkness as well.
And to some extent, I'd ask the question, how much does it matter? It's sort of like the Ouija board conversation where anybody with a background in demonology will tell you, like, I don't care if you aren't literally trying to channel demons. Like, don't get the board game Ouija board because it's a pathway. It's going to mess up your life and you don't want any part of that. Even if you don't believe in Satan and you're just like, this is I'm in my mom's basement. I'm sleeping till 10 a.m. every day. And then I'm going to go make my blog post on why I'm a satanic abortion supporter. Even if you don't believe any of it, you just don't want to mess around with it. Nothing good comes when you invoke the devil.
And we believe in the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a couple of former abortion workers sort of with this, they thought they were going to shock me. And they admitted that and when they were younger, before they got in the abortion industry, when they were kind of turning back the clock, what went wrong where I was now working in an abortion facility. And some of them have admitted that they played with a Ouija board. And you dabble in the occult and you let that in. And they could trace that back. And I was always like, that explains a lot. I mean, it's not a relief, but that's it. I mean, that's it. You want to know where you went wrong. You want to know how all of a sudden you looked up, and your life was totally out of control. You let the devil in your soul. And that's why we do take this seriously. And so do they. The Guardian doesn't. The Guardian thinks it's all like a fictional game. They're the Satanists are like a branch of the Green Party. And they're just,
it's edgy and it's provocative.
If you want to be a rebellion, shouldn't you be an Orthodox Jew or a conservative Catholic or an evangelical? Isn't that the rebellion? I mean, are the Satanists rebellious? The devil has a foothold on most of the world. I mean that's the rebellion, is the Satanists. Do whatever you want, live for yourself and worship for yourself and worship anything bad and call it good. That's mainstream. That's just like turning on the television. So the whole notion that it's rebellion, like William Wallace or The Outsiders or Dennis Rodman, is this edgy rebel. Wow, it's interesting. That's not it. Allen Iverson, is he a Satanist? I don't think so. There's rebels everywhere. They're not Satanists. They don't worship the devil. And but they gotta downplay it. I think they got to downplay it because they have an ally they don't really want. Hey, we're trying to do this and we believe in evil or whatever, but we can't publicly lock arm in arm with the Satanists and then run out and talk about how we're the compassionate ones when the 14-year-old girl is raped and how we really care about her and the pro-life movement doesn't. You can't do that with the demon statue behind you and you're talking to the 14-year-old. And that is why maybe it's disingenuous. I think the Guardian's trying to cover for him and the other media outlets, but it's just wild. So, okay. The next point on this is this is typical. It's inherent with pagans, Steve. We referenced that podcast earlier.
It is. I think the Judeo-Christian tradition is the one worldwide that we see never get involved in the slaughter of innocent children. Just for whatever reason, we check out the podcast, season 7, episode 13. We'll link to it on the show page, but you can go, it spans geography, it spans history. It doesn't matter what happens. Paganism and the killing of children go hand in hand. And this can be, again, whether you believe in these false gods or not, in my opinion, and we've talked about this on that episode of the podcast, it's sort of tempting for us to look back and say, okay, all of these pagan gods are false gods. Well, yes, they're false gods to the extent that they're not gods, but that doesn't mean that they are fictional characters. Some of them are quite likely actual demons that are, through evil intentions or through ignorance, people fall into service to them. And that can be a very dangerous thing. And it is always a bloody thing, whether it's Baal or Moloch or whoever it is. We even have had speak at a variety of 40 Days for Life vigils, a former like Church of Satan, like high priest or whatever they call him, who described how he was involved in ritualistic abortions, in service of a Satan that he literally believed in. These things that we don't want to believe they're real because we live in this age of reason and we've moved past superstition, but I think we live in frankly the most superstitious age of them all, and there's a lot of blood shed in honor to demons, false gods, pagan entities.
Yeah, and the former Satanists are some of the most powerful testimonials you'll ever hear. There's one particularly, he ended up Catholic. And he was high up in the Church of Satan, and he talked about doing abortions as a sacrifice on an altar. So it's very real, not because we say it, but because the former Satanists say it, and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. The devil loves abortion.
We've got a 40 Days for Life leader, Sean. I don't know, you might know this, you might not, but we've got a leader who is on the exorcism team of his local diocese, and his job is to hold down the possessed people when they start to levitate. I don't know why I chuckle there because it's real, but is these things, as much as we kind of like, we don't really believe that, we know people who have seen it firsthand.
Absolutely. And the reporter at The Guardian who thinks that the Satanists, look at Satan like he's Mickey Mouse, like he's some fictional character that they just kind of follow.
The Halloween costume with the pointy horns and the tail and everything.
Yeah, exactly. That is being extremely naive, especially when you talk to a former Satanist or an exorcist or a priest who has taken part in a real exorcist. They're very rare, but they do happen. One thing I want to mention is a great Lenten movie. We've mentioned it before, definitely 18 and up. But the idea of pagan sacrifice, Apocalypto, is a fantastic movie. Very well done. It is about the Aztecs and sacrifice, and it is so relevant today. That's another one you watch once every 10 years. That's not like, hey, I didn't get any M&Ms. You don't really say that during Apocalypto. You don't.
The popcorn sales weren't great during the box office release.
They were not great. But a great movie if you haven't seen it. You're glad you watched it. You're not. It's very hopeful actually. You're not gonna turn it off and be like, why did I do that? But I think, Steve, that was definitely in our pro-life movie podcast that we did. So. Which we'll probably have to do another one of those because we weren't able to cover all the movies. It was a very popular podcast and controversial podcast. I'd like to repeat to a few regular listeners that Terminator 2 is a pro-life movie, for the record. So check that out, but definitely go get Apocalypto. Great movie. Mel Gibson directed it, and it's very, very well done. Okay, let's just go back to the beginning, because we mentioned the devil loves abortion, and there's this goofy part of what we're saying with the satanic temple, and there's a very serious part. But it's important for us to answer the question, well, why does the devil like abortion?
Yeah, there's a lot of sins out there, and he could pick any one of them, but it really seems as though the destruction of the family and the destruction of the unborn child, or the born child now, is really among his favorite. And we know our Lord tells us, John's Gospel, chapter 8, the devil was a murderer from the beginning. And I think some of this has to do with the fact that our Lord came into this world as an unborn baby and then as a newborn baby. And that really stings the devil, because the devil wants to be powerful. The devil, in many ways, it's believed, rejected the Lord because the devil refused to serve a creature like the human being, who he thought was too low and weak and disgusting to bother serving. And so our Lord gets this ultimate triumph over the devil by coming into the world, by taking on the flesh that the devil so despised, and by being weak and vulnerable and lowly and humble. And so I think the devil just loses his mind whenever there's a baby in the picture. What's greater sign of hope is there than a newborn baby? What greater sign of joy is there than a positive pregnancy test? These things are wonderful, and the devil can't handle that joy, wants to destroy it. And again, it spans time, it spans geography, all throughout history. This is the MO of Satan, is to destroy new life.
Yeah, I mean, our Lord himself references hell 33 times. There are some Christians that went around and say hell doesn't exist. They're lying. Don't listen to that. That's very dangerous. It does exist. And Jesus references it 33 times. And when I think of the devil, I think of arrogance, Steve, because he tempts our Lord. It's how arrogant he is. It's how powerful he thinks that he is. So there's no soul he won't go after. There's no person he won't go all in for and try to get their soul. If he's tempting Christ in the desert, that should humble us to think, well, I have no chance on my own. And we don't. We have no chance against the devil on our own. It should really help us cling to the cross and cling to our Lord. Because there is no reasonable temptation for the devil. He tempted Jesus Christ and quoted scripture to him. So it's very, very important to just be aware of that. And I think that especially in this work in the pro-life movement, we know that there's a lot of spiritual warfare. We talked about that last week with kicking off Lent and Ash Wednesday and our resolution. It's why all that is important. Why the prayer and fasting isn't a game. It's not a joke. It's very, very real, because the devil's very, very real. And we're seeing him expose himself in public more now more than ever. And we just haven't seen that. There's an apologetic question in here that I guess we're going to have to write What to Say When Part 2, Steve. But Satanists support abortion and are now doing abortions in post-Roe America. Do you believe that's good or bad?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we see the mask come off, I think we should find some confidence in it, because in this post-Roe world, we all know it's a good thing that Roe has been overturned, and we all can see the progress in the states that have ended abortion or rolled back abortion, the birth rate going up, the abortion rate going down, all good things. And alongside it, I think some people have gotten a little bit freaked out as they see the extreme measures to which the abortion industry is going and to which they're being motivated, I think, by the devil. The infanticide, the abortion sanctuary states, the clergy for abortion, all of these absurd and insane things that we talk about on the podcast and that everybody is reading about in the headlines. And it takes me back. I was listening in preparation for this podcast. I listened to an interview with an exorcist who said, on Good Friday, which we're all preparing ourselves for right now, on Good Friday, when the Lord was crucified and died on that cross, the devil thought that he had won. And that was the final nail in the devil's coffin. That was the ultimate loss for the devil. And so we've got to remember, like, look, the devil is going to, perhaps win some battles here and there, but we've got to keep our eye on the big prize. The devil thinks he wins and his demise has already been sealed. We just need to cooperate with it. And what a gift. I talk whenever I'm out on the road and I'm talking to 40 Days for Life vigil participants and trying to help get them fired up to keep ending abortion in their community. I say, you know what? Our Lord is all powerful. He could end abortion in an instant without us. He doesn't need us, but in his mercy and in his generosity, the Lord invites us, you and me, to be part of the solution to this crisis. We get to share in that victory over the devil. As you said, Sean, we can't do it without the Lord, but with the Lord, all things are possible. And that's taking place in our midst.
Yeah. And, St. Peter tells us the devil is like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. But he's chained on earth. He doesn't have complete power on earth. He is unchained in hell. He is unchained in hell. I heard a beautiful reflection one time on that. And that is very real to think about. He's a roaring lion on earth looking for someone to devour. But he can't devour you on earth unless you let him. He still is chained. He's restricted. But he's not chained in hell. And that's why we do this work. And that's why we take it seriously. And we trust God. We don't run around to the grocery store telling everybody that the devil's going to get them like a crazy person. But we need to be aware of him, know that we'll be tempted, and know that we can overcome temptation. That's what he wants us to do, is sin. That's his goal. And that's his goal with abortion. We're just seeing it now more than ever. It's a great quote. I think it was St. Teresa of Avila who had visions of the devil. And she would wake up in the middle of the night and this demon would be like in the corner of her room growling at her. And she was known to wake up, look over and say, "Oh, it's just you," and go back to sleep. And so that is the kind of trust that we're striving for. So, "Oh, it's just you." I love that. Okay. As we close out here, I encourage you, if you haven't, to go back and to watch or listen to the podcast last week. We give you a lot of fuel to combat the devil, but also just to get through the campaign. We mentioned earlier this Lent and this podcast, we have so much good news. There is so much good news. And frankly, that's why I think we see these stupid Satanists coming out and being so loud and proud, is because they're losing. They're losing. And we have all of the momentum. Our country helped spread abortion around the world, and now we're leading the way to end it. No one would have seen this coming, even 10 years ago or 25 years ago. But that is what's happening, and the devil's not happy. But you should be happy, and you should participate, and you should pray, and you should fast, and you should know that God will use you to save the life of a baby, to help a mother, and we are in it for hearts, minds, and souls. That's what saves babies, and that's what closes abortion facilities. So be sure to tune in next week. Listen to last week. If you haven't already, check out that movie podcast that we referenced. Check out Apocalypto, and also check out the Pagan Sacrifice podcast. We'll put that on the page for this podcast so that you could check that out. A good Lenten reflection, and that's, I would say overall, that's a very uplifting podcast. So go check that out. And thank you, Steve, as you continue to journey through Lent. We're all in this together. So pray for one another, and we will see you next time. God bless you.